The mornings in Palm Beach, Florida are always pleasant with the breeze from the ocean. Martha Bradley stood on the veranda, holding her 3-month-old daughter Amy in her arms, gazing at the sunrise spreading across the horizon. The sight of the soft sunlight turning the sea surface golden was one of the reasons she loved this town. "Good morning, my angel," Martha smiled and kissed Amy's cheek. The baby narrowed her eyes and reached out with her tiny hands, trying to touch her mother's face. This innocent smile gave Martha strength to live every morning. From the kitchen, she heard her husband James's voice. "Breakfast is ready." Martha returned to the dining room still holding her daughter. The table was set with seasonal fruits and whole wheat pancakes. James was a marine biologist and one of the most reputable environmental conservation advisors in the area. His expertise was highly valued by luxury cruise ship companies, and he received constant speaking requests on the theme of balancing marine ecosystem protection with the tourism industry. "You have a guest lecture at the university this afternoon, right?" Martha asked as she placed Amy in her baby chair. "Yes, and then I have a meeting with executives from Atlantic Cruise Line." James took a sip of his coffee and continued. "They've asked me to supervise their new environmental conservation program. I'll also do the final check for next week's Caribbean cruise." Martha nodded and took a sip of her coffee. She herself worked as a nutritionist providing consulting services at local hospitals and fitness centers, but since Amy's birth, she had temporarily cut back on work. "Have you heard from your uncle?" Martha asked carefully. James's uncle was one of the major shareholders of Atlantic Cruise Line and was the person who had created the connection between James and the company. "Oh, yes, he called yesterday. He said he's inviting the whole family to a VIP suite," James answered with a smile. "And that includes your mother and sister." Martha's expression clouded for a moment. Her relationship with her mother Gloria and sister Courtney was complicated. Gloria Anderson was so well known in local society that there was hardly anyone who didn't know her. She served as the chairperson of multiple charitable organizations, and her perfect manners and elegant behavior were considered exemplary in high society. Courtney, on the other hand, had over 100,000 followers on Instagram and was active as an influencer who was always chasing the latest trends. "Is something bothering you?" James didn't miss the change in Martha's expression. "No, it's nothing," Martha forced a smile. To tell the truth, she felt anxious about her mother and sister joining the cruise as a real family. Gloria and Courtney had never been kind to Martha until she married James. Her mother constantly told her to be more beautiful, smarter, and more successful, and her sister Courtney was always her mother's favorite. When Martha began working as an ordinary nutritionist, Gloria even declared, "You always disappoint me." However, when her engagement to James was announced, the situation changed dramatically. The Bradley family name and fortune transformed Gloria and Courtney's attitudes. Suddenly, they became kind to Martha and offered to help with wedding preparations. But Martha knew their change was superficial. The two would occasionally refer to Martha's marriage as a good deal when she couldn't hear, and made no attempt to hide their interest in James's family wealth. After Amy was born, Gloria and Courtney's attitudes became cold again. They showed no interest in the baby and were critical of Martha's parenting methods. She often heard comments like, "Will that child grow up properly?" and "You're spoiling her too much with your methods." "Martha." James's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Are you okay?" "Sorry, I was just thinking," Martha made an excuse. "I'm looking forward to the cruise, of course. Mother and Courtney must be pleased too." "I was hesitant about whether to invite them," James said with a serious expression. "I know how your mother has treated you. But they're family." "Their family," Martha repeated those words. Yes, that was the reason she had endured it all this time. They were blood relations. Amy suddenly made a cooing sound, drawing her parents' attention. Martha looked at her daughter and made a silent promise, "I'll teach you a different kind of family. A true family filled with love and respect." The phone rang, and Martha picked up the receiver. "Martha?" "It's Gloria," her mother's voice echoed. "I was talking with Courtney about your cruise trip. We're coming." There's no reason to decline James's uncle's invitation. Martha took a deep breath. "Of course, Mother." It'll be wonderful to spend time as a family. From the other end of the phone, she could hear Courtney's laughter. An ominous feeling spread through Martha's heart. Still, she maintained her smile and replied, "Let's meet at the dock next week." James placed his hand on Martha's shoulder and gently embraced her. "It'll be all right. This will be a good experience, especially for Amy." Martha nodded, but anxiety swirled inside her. "What a beautiful morning," Martha said, holding Amy and leaning lightly against the deck railing. The blue expanse of the Caribbean Sea below was enough to ease her tension. The second day aboard the cruise ship, Atlantic Princess, was already blessed with gentle sea breezes and brilliant sunshine. James put his arm around his wife's waist and smiled. "It's like a postcard scene." He had already prepared for his marine life lecture scheduled for that afternoon. His high-quality linen shirt and hemp pants made him look even more attractive. As they were about to have breakfast at the Terrace Cafe, they spotted Gloria and Courtney. The two had already secured a table and were conversing with wealthy-looking passengers around them. Gloria was dressed in a perfect Chanel tweed suit, while Courtney sported brand-name sunglasses and a silk kaftan. "Good morning, Mother," Martha greeted them cheerfully. Gloria merely glanced at her before returning to her conversation with a gentleman at the next table. Courtney didn't look up from her phone and replied dismissively, "Oh, morning." James noticed the shadow cross Martha's face and said while amusing Amy, "Why don't you feed Amy her breakfast? I'll get the coffee." As Martha was preparing baby food, she overheard Gloria's voice from the next table. "Yes, my son-in-law is a famous researcher in environmental science. He's even supervising the environmental conservation program for this ship." Gloria continued to boast proudly to the surrounding passengers. "His uncle is also a major shareholder of this cruise line. We're on board by special invitation." Courtney joined in, saying, "I'm posting updates about this cruise on my Instagram every day. I've already received thousands of likes." Martha silently continued feeding her daughter. Though she was accustomed to her mother and sister showing off James's status and wealth, it hurt her heart every time. After breakfast, James headed to the staff room on the ship to prepare for his lecture. "Let's go sightseeing on the island after my afternoon lecture is done," he promised Martha with a kiss. Martha returned to their room and was selecting a dress for the afternoon party. As she was trying on a dress, she heard a knock. Opening the door, she found Courtney standing there. "Getting ready?" Courtney entered the room and began rummaging through Martha's wardrobe. "Are you planning to wear this?" She picked up the pale blue dress Martha had chosen and snickered. "Is there a problem?" Martha asked calmly. "Are you going to embarrass James by wearing something so tacky?" Courtney frowned. "It's the captain's party. There will be many important industry people there." Martha took a deep breath and replied, "This is a dress in James's favorite color. He always compliments me when I wear it." Courtney rolled her eyes and said, "You were just lucky to marry James. Someone like me would be more suitable for him." Martha stared at her sister in surprise. "What are you saying?" "Face reality," Courtney said coldly. "You're an ordinary nutritionist, not particularly beautiful, and have no social skills. There's no way a man like James would choose you. The only reason he was initially interested in you was because you happened to be working as a server at Mother's party, and he felt sorry for you." "That's not true," Martha's voice trembled. "We married because we love each other." "Love?" Courtney said in a contemptuous voice. "Rich people often do charity work. You were his charity project." Tears welled up in Martha's eyes, but she turned away to hide them. Amy began to cry, and Martha hurried to the baby's crib. "The same goes for that child," Courtney continued. "I can tell. James gave you a child so you couldn't escape. Since the child carries his family bloodline, he can't easily abandon you." "Get out," Martha said with a shaking voice. "Get out right now." Courtney chuckled and left the room, saying, "I look forward to seeing you at the afternoon party in that shabby dress." Martha hugged Amy, trying to calm her emotions. Her sister's words were cruel but not entirely new. Courtney had always looked down on Martha and envied her success and happiness. A few hours later, the captain's party began. Martha ultimately decided to wear the blue dress. When James saw her, he whispered in her ear, "You look beautiful today as always." The party venue was filled with prominent passengers, including the captain and company executives. Gloria was already engaged in friendly conversation with the captain. When Martha and James approached, she said, "Oh, James, and Martha too. You finally made it." The captain extended his hand to James for a handshake. "Dr. Bradley, it's an honor to meet you. Your book on environmental conservation was very educational." "Thank you," James replied modestly. Gloria turned to the captain and said, "Martha is just a nutritionist. She doesn't have a professional career." James's expression hardened. "Nutritionist is an important profession, Gloria. Martha has contributed to improving the health of many patients." Gloria waved her hand lightly and made an excuse, "Of course, I'm just joking," but her intention was clear. At that moment, Amy, whom Martha was holding, began to cry. Amy's voice gradually grew louder, and people around them turned to look. Martha tried to soothe the baby, but Amy wouldn't stop crying. "You should have left such a noisy child in the room," Gloria said loud enough for everyone to hear. "It shows a lack of common sense to bring a baby to a party." Martha's face turned red. As James was about to protest, Courtney started taking pictures. "I'll upload this to Instagram." The moment a party gets ruined. Martha's anger and sadness reached their peak. She hugged Amy tightly and said quietly, "I'll go back to the room. I'll calm Amy down." James gently took his wife's arm. "I'll go with you." "No, you stay," Martha said in a low voice. "You have your speech." "Don't worry, I'll be back soon." After leaving the party venue, Martha took a deep breath in the hallway. Amy was gradually beginning to calm down. Martha decided to go out on deck to get some fresh air. Stars shone in the night sky, and the sound of gentle waves could be heard. She heard voices from a corner of the deck. As Martha approached, she saw Gloria and Courtney sitting and talking in a lounge area. They seemed to think no one was around. "When James's uncle dies, a huge inheritance will be passed down," Gloria's voice carried on the night breeze. "But now, because of the baby, our share will be reduced. We need to do something about it," Courtney's voice sounded ominous. "If only that child weren't here," Gloria said as she brought a wine glass to her lips. "Martha would do whatever we say." Martha froze. Her body began to tremble, and she held Amy more tightly. The conversation between her mother and sister was no joke. They were serious. Martha quietly backed away and hurried back to their cabin. Closing the cabin door, Martha laid Amy on the bed. Her heart was racing, and sweat trickled down her back. Her mother and sister's words echoed in her head. Along with fear, anger was welling up from within her. Should she tell James? Would he believe her? Or would he think she was exaggerating family issues? Martha held Amy's tiny hand and quietly vowed, "Don't worry, I'll protect you. No matter what." She heard footsteps from the hallway, and her tension increased. The doorknob turned, and James entered. His face showed concern. "Are you okay?" He approached Martha. "Your mother's attitude is unacceptable. I plan to have a serious talk with her tomorrow." Martha carefully chose her words and replied, "James. I overheard them talking." Morning on the 5th day of the cruise came earlier than usual. Martha woke up to sunlight streaming through the window and gazed at James sleeping soundly beside her. Last night, she had tried to tell her husband about the ominous conversation between her mother and sister, but the words had stuck in her throat. In the end, she only said, "I'm concerned about Mother's attitude," without sharing the details. James had embraced her shoulders and gently said, "There's plenty of time to repair your relationship with your mother." He understood that Martha's mother and sister were difficult people, but he couldn't imagine just how calculating and dangerous they truly were. "Today is a special day," James said during breakfast. "The ship will pass through the famous Blue Lagoon. It's a treasure trove of marine life, and various types of sharks also live there." "Sharks?" Martha asked anxiously. "Don't worry," James said reassuringly. "It's completely safe. I'll be hosting a marine life observation event on deck this morning. I hope you and Amy will come. At 10 a.m., Martha carried Amy up to the deck. A large number of passengers had already gathered, and people with binoculars were gazing at the sea. James was holding a microphone, passionately talking about the Caribbean ecosystem. In one corner of the deck, Gloria and Courtney could also be seen. The two were relaxing in lounge chairs, sipping cocktails while observing the event. Martha kept her distance from them and sat in the front row. This area is designated as a marine protected area, James continued his explanation. At least 7 species of sharks live here, including great white sharks and hammerhead sharks. A murmur rose from the audience, and several people approached the edge of the ship to peer into the sea. Indeed, large shadows could be seen slowly moving beneath the deep blue surface. There's no need to worry, James continued with a smile. They have no interest in humans. As long as we respect their ecosystem, they will respect us. The lecture continued for about an hour, with participants eagerly taking notes and asking questions. Martha felt renewed pride in her husband's depth of knowledge and passion. Amy also seemed to be quietly listening to her father's talk, occasionally reaching out her small hand to point toward the sea. After the lecture, a short break was scheduled. James returned to the cabin temporarily to discuss the next program with the crew, leaving Martha and Amy behind. That was a nice event. Martha turned around to find Gloria standing behind her. Her mother was dressed in a perfect linen dress and wore a large straw hat. Courtney also stood next to her, fiddling with her smartphone as usual. Yes, James's lectures are always wonderful, Martha answered cautiously. She considered mentioning the conversation she had overheard last night but decided against it in this public place. I'd like to talk to you privately, Gloria pointed to a deserted area of the deck. Would you come over there for a moment? Martha hesitated. Amy is tired. I was thinking of going back to our room. It won't take long, Gloria said in an unusually gentle voice. We should get along better as a family. Those words softened Martha's heart a little. Perhaps her mother wanted to reconcile. She slowly nodded and followed Gloria and Courtney toward the stern of the ship. It was a quiet space away from other passengers, with a view of the ship's wake. Martha held Amy tightly and gazed at the sea. Beneath the transparent blue water, large shadows could occasionally be seen moving. Let me see the baby? Gloria suddenly said. I haven't had a proper chance to look at her. Martha was a bit surprised but was secretly pleased that her mother showed interest in her granddaughter. Of course, she adjusted her hold to make Amy's face visible. Gloria approached Amy and touched her small cheek. She's a cute child, she said. There was a warmth in her voice that Martha hadn't heard in years. The next moment, Gloria took Amy from her arms. Let me hold her for a bit. Martha couldn't resist. It would have been unnatural to refuse her mother's contact with her granddaughter. She decided to watch from a short distance. Gloria gently rocked Amy while taking a few steps back. She really is a beautiful child, she smiled at Martha. She has the Bradley family blood. And then suddenly, Gloria's expression changed. Her eyes became cold and sharp. But this child doesn't belong in our family. Her voice suddenly grew louder, and several passengers on the deck turned around. Gloria started walking toward the edge of the deck. Courtney took out her smartphone and began filming. Mother? Martha managed to choke out. What are you doing? I'm taking this child who ruined my life. Gloria moved closer to the railing. Martha's body froze. It took her brain a few seconds to understand the situation. Her mother was taking Amy toward the railing. Beyond the railing was the sea. And in the sea, sharks. Stop! Martha cried out. Her feet began to move. Give Amy back. When Gloria reached the deck railing, she held Amy high. There was a manic light in her eyes. The surrounding passengers also began to understand the situation, and several let out screams. Such a child is not worthy of our family. We don't need her. Gloria shouted. And unbelievably, she threw Amy over the railing. Amy! Martha's scream echoed throughout the ship. She rushed to the railing and saw a small white bundle falling into the sea. Beneath the surface, gray shadows were moving quickly. Martha immediately tried to climb over the railing, but surrounding passengers held her back. "Let me go. My baby is." She struggled desperately. "It's dangerous to jump in." A man grabbed her arm. "We'll launch a lifeboat." The ship's alarm sounded, and crew members began to rush over. Amid the chaos, Courtney's laughter could be heard. She held a wine glass in one hand and her smartphone in the other. "This is so hilarious." Courtney laughed out loud. "Finally got rid of her." Martha stared at her sister in disbelief. Her whole body was shaking, and her vision began to narrow. Was this nightmare real? Her own mother throwing her baby into the sea, and her sister laughing about it? At that moment, a large splash rose from another part of the deck. Someone had jumped into the sea. As Martha's gaze turned in that direction, she saw James. He had jumped into the sea without a life jacket and was swimming strongly toward where Amy had fallen. "James!" Martha cried out. "Be careful. The sharks." Surrounding passengers took out their smartphones and began filming this incredible scene. The ship's crew hastily prepared to lower a lifeboat. Martha's heart was pounding, and she had only one prayer. "Please, save Amy. Keep James safe too." Tense minutes passed. Ripples spread across the sea's surface, and gray shadows occasionally appeared and disappeared. Martha clung to the railing, straining to see through tears that blurred her vision. And suddenly, a head emerged from the water. It was James. He was holding Amy with one arm and desperately paddling with the other. Large shadows circled around him, but strangely, they didn't attack. The ship's crew immediately threw a rescue rope and began guiding James. Martha watched, holding her breath. James gradually approached the ship and was finally pulled onto the lifeboat. He was holding Amy tightly. "They're safe." A boat crew member shouted. "The baby is alive." A wave of relief and joy rose from the passengers gathered on the deck. Martha collapsed to her knees, tears flowing freely. But in the next moment, a flame of anger ignited in her eyes. She slowly stood up and turned to face Gloria and Courtney, who were still standing there. "You too." Martha's voice was low and trembling. But before she could finish her words, the angry voices of the surrounding passengers drowned her out. "Catch those women. Call the police. They tried to kill a child." The captain and several security officers rushed over and surrounded Gloria and Courtney. The color had drained from their faces. Courtney's smartphone had fallen to the floor, the recording indicator still flashing on the screen. "Gloria Anderson, Courtney Anderson," the captain said in a stern voice. "You will be detained in the ship's security room. We will hand you over to the police at the next port." Martha stared at the two of them, vowing in her heart, "I will never let you near my family again." The sound of the lifeboat being hoisted back to the ship could be heard. Martha quickly left the scene to welcome James and Amy. When James and Amy were lifted onto the ship, the deck fell silent for a moment. Then, applause and cheers erupted. Martha rushed to them in a daze and took the crying Amy from soaking wet James. The baby's body was cold and shaking, but she was breathing steadily. "Hurry to the infirmary," the ship's medical staff called out. "We need to examine her, just to be safe." Martha held Amy to her chest, and looking back, she could see Gloria and Courtney surrounded by the ship's security officers. The color had drained from Gloria's face, and Courtney looked around with a frightened expression. Their plan had completely failed, and in front of dozens of witnesses, their cruel act had been exposed. Martha's eyes met her mother's for just a moment. There was fear in Gloria's eyes, but also still some calculating light. She seemed to be trying to make excuses. However, Martha turned her back and hurried to the infirmary with James. At this moment, only Amy's safety mattered to her. In the infirmary, the ship's doctor carefully examined Amy. "Miraculously, there are no major injuries," the doctor said with a relieved expression. "There's concern about hypothermia, but she should be fine if we warm her up quickly." James was also examined, and fortunately, he had nothing more than scrapes and mild muscle pain. The doctor placed his hand on James's shoulder and said, "Your courageous action saved your child's life. I respect your decision to jump in despite the danger." "I had no choice," James answered quietly. "Amy is more precious to me than my own life." Martha embraced her husband, tears flowing. "That you came back, that you're both safe." Her words caught in her throat, and she just continued crying. "Those sharks," James said wonderingly. "They were swimming around me, but they didn't attack. It was almost as if they were protecting us." The captain entered the infirmary. "Mr. and Mrs. Bradley, this has been a terrible incident, but I'm relieved your child is safe," he continued with a serious expression. "Gloria Anderson and Courtney Anderson are currently detained in the ship's security room. We've urgently changed course to Key West, Florida. We will hand them over to authorities there." "Thank you," Martha responded. "We are prepared to testify." "That won't be necessary," the captain shrugged. At least 10 passengers recorded the entire incident on their smartphones. Those videos are already spreading on social media. Your mother and sister also left evidence on their own smartphones. Martha gasped. On social media. Unfortunately, shocking incidents like this spread quickly, the captain said apologetically. The #SharkBaby incident is already trending nationwide. Martha and James were speechless. The most horrifying moment of their private lives was now a video being watched by people across the country. The next morning, the ship arrived at the port of Key West. Several police vehicles and media vans were already parked on the dock. Martha and James had spent the night with Amy in the infirmary, preparing themselves mentally. "You will be escorted off the ship by police," the ship's security officer explained. "We will protect you from the media, so don't worry." When they went up on deck, Gloria and Courtney were standing surrounded by security guards. Both were handcuffed and stared straight ahead with pale faces. Gloria's perfect makeup was smudged, and Courtney's expensive clothes were wrinkled. Martha disembarked quietly with James, holding Amy tightly, without directly looking at the two. Meanwhile, the scene of Gloria and Courtney being escorted to police vehicles was captured by numerous cameras. "Mrs. Martha Bradley," reporters shouted. "Why did your mother throw your baby into the sea? What's your relationship with Courtney? Were you abused since childhood?" James put his arm around his wife and daughter protectively and ignored the reporters, getting into the prepared car. "We will now take your formal statement at the police station," a detective explained. "Afterward, you can apply for a restraining order if necessary." After giving their testimony at the Florida State Police Station, Martha and James moved to a hotel. When they turned on the television, their incident was being reported on all channels. "A shocking incident known as the SharkBaby incident has occurred," an announcer was saying with a serious expression. On a cruise ship, a grandmother committed the unbelievable act of throwing her 3-month-old granddaughter into shark-infested waters. Fortunately, the baby was safely rescued thanks to the father's brave action. The screen showed footage, with faces blurred, of Gloria throwing Amy over the railing, followed by James jumping into the sea, and then the moving moment of their rescue. The Florida State Attorney's Office has issued a statement revealing plans to charge suspects Gloria Anderson and Courtney Anderson with attempted murder, child abuse, public endangerment through dangerous acts, and other felonies. Martha turned off the television with the remote. The sense that this was reality still hadn't settled in her mind. "My life is being watched by everyone," she whispered. "Time will heal this," James placed his hand on her shoulder. "We haven't done anything wrong. Rather, this might make many people aware of the seriousness of child abuse." True to his words, the incident quickly sparked nationwide discussion. Psychologists and family relationship experts appeared on television to explain issues of toxic parents and power dynamics within families. Social media was flooded with messages of support and encouragement for Martha and James. Hashtags like #PrayForAmy, #BraveFatherJames, and #JusticeForMartha emerged one after another, and people took their side. Meanwhile, Gloria and Courtney were completely condemned by the public. Their past activities and statements were dug up, revealing various contradictions and problems. Gloria was dismissed from the charitable organization where she had served as chairperson, and Courtney's social media accounts were closed. Even former friends and acquaintances began to deny their relationships with the two. The trial proceeded with unusual speed. With clear evidence and numerous witnesses, the prosecution was in a strong position. The defense claimed temporary insanity, but conversation recordings discovered on Courtney's smartphone revealed that they had planned in advance. When the motive, to make James's family inheritance their own and to eliminate Amy, was stated in court, angry voices rose from the gallery. The trial result was as expected. Gloria received a 20-year prison sentence, and Courtney received 15 years as an accomplice. After the sentencing, Martha had her final confrontation with Gloria in the courthouse hallway. Her mother was wearing a gray prison uniform and standing with handcuffs on. The shadow of age lay heavy on her face, and all her former beauty and dignity had completely disappeared. Why? Martha asked simply. Why would you try to kill your own granddaughter? Gloria stared at Martha with cold eyes and calmly said, that child would have rights to James's inheritance, reducing our share. I couldn't allow that. Martha trembled at those words. Finally, she understood. Gloria and Courtney had tried to eliminate Amy to monopolize the inheritance rights from James's wealthy family. For them, their relationship with Martha and even Amy's life were just tools for financial gain. You are no longer my mother, Martha said quietly. A true family doesn't sacrifice children for money or honor. A flash of pain seemed to appear in Gloria's eyes for a moment, but it quickly disappeared. She gave no answer and was led away by guards. Martha took a deep breath and left the courthouse. Outside, James was waiting with Amy in his arms. He smiled and said, "Let's go home. To our true family." A year after the incident, on a spring morning, Martha stood on the veranda of her Palm Beach home, gazing at the morning sea with a renewed sense of peace. Amy was already 15 months old and had begun toddling on her little feet. She heard James's footsteps behind her, and he gently placed his hand on his wife's shoulder. "We're ready. It's almost time for the ceremony," he said with a smile. Today was a special day. It was the official inauguration ceremony for their Guardians of the Sea Foundation, and also the day they would welcome a new family member. "Your uncle is truly a wonderful person," Martha said with gratitude. After the incident, James's uncle had revised the family inheritance management method and decided to allocate the fortune that Gloria and Courtney had been aiming for to a family foundation dedicated to child welfare and marine conservation. And he entrusted its operation to Martha and James. The shocking incident had attracted national attention, and the Shark Baby story had touched many people's hearts. Charity events commemorating Amy's rescue had become national events, with support pouring in from celebrities and corporations. "This afternoon, Tommy will officially join our family," Martha said in an emotional voice. Tommy was a 1-year-old boy who had been living in a children's home. He too had been a victim of abuse, but Martha and James had decided to welcome him as their adopted son. "They'll grow up in the same room," James said, peeking into Amy's playroom. Another bed had been placed in the room, waiting for the new family member. Before getting into the car, Martha glanced at the newspaper. There was a small article in the Society section. The headline read, "Inmate Gloria Anderson faces mental issues in prison." According to the article, Gloria was troubled by hallucinations and had nightmares every night about sharks eating children. Courtney was also mentioned. She was tormented by the fear that, due to the permanent record on social media, she would never be able to return to a normal life after her release. Martha closed the newspaper. There was no longer any resentment or hatred in her heart. Rather, she felt a kind of peace in the fact that the tragedy had brought new purpose and meaning to her life. "Let's go," she picked up Amy. "To our new family." The ceremony was held in a park along the beautiful coastline. It was overflowing with people celebrating the launch of the Guardians of the Sea Foundation. Martha and James stood on the platform and spoke about the foundation's purpose, the fusion of child abuse prevention and marine ecosystem conservation. Inspired by their story, many people had begun similar initiatives across the country. In the afternoon, they welcomed Tommy at the adoption center. The little boy was nervous at first, but when Amy offered him a small stuffed animal, a smile spread across his face. That night, after putting both children to bed, Martha wrote in her diary. Blood ties may be one way to start a family, but love and devotion are what make a true family. The inheritance my mother and sister wanted is now being used for abused children and marine life. Should we call it life's irony, or cosmic justice? Outside the window, the sound of gentle waves could be heard. Martha put down her pen and headed for bed. James was already asleep. She gently kissed her husband's cheek and lay down. Tomorrow was a new day, the real beginning of life with their new family. Good night, my beloved family, she whispered, falling into a peaceful sleep.